All right, next one. Speaking of a similar topic, Lynette asks, why do you think the world is not asking for the surrender of Hamas, but instead focused on asking Israel to not defend their country? Hamas surrender would be a better diplomatic protest.
You know what? None of that makes sense, does it? The idea that you would go out and you would advocate for a nation that put Hamas in charge. Well, it's not even a nation. It's a state within the state of Israel that would put Hamas in charge, a bunch of terrorists in charge, and then support them when they go in and they butcher a bunch of people. And in actuality, it wasn't just Hamas that did this. When you go through and you really look at what was taking place on October 7th, it was Hamas that was going in with weapons, and then Palestinian men from Gaza who followed in behind, who were in on this whole thing also. And so they weren't necessarily people who were actually connected with Hamas at that time. They were supporters, but they went in and, we know famously that they gang raped women and then burned them alive and cut their heads off, and burned babies alive and cut their heads off and that kind of thing. And any group of people that would advocate for those people, there is something wrong with them. And that's why I think that they do it. It's because there's something wrong with them. And what's wrong with them is they have turned away from God. And when you turn away from God, you leave a vacuum in your life, and Satan comes in and fills it. Frankly, all of this stuff is satanic. Why would you go after, it's just been this way with the Jews for thousands of years. Everybody gets tweaked and goes after the Jews and tries to wipe them out and kill them off. And you have pogroms. It's where the ghettos came from. It's where you have all this awful stuff that takes place with the Jewish nation down through the years. And it is nothing but a spiritual issue. That's why it's a spiritual issue. So Satan hates the Jews because God loves them. And so Satan wants to kill the Jews because God loves them. And anybody that isn't following the Lord is open to that kind of propaganda from Satan, and open to the deception that will get them into that position. And I don't care where they're coming from. There's some famous Christians, so-called, who did exactly the same thing with the Jews. And so it's a spiritual issue. That's why they do it. There's no logic to it. You can't talk to these people. And, obviously 70 years ago, we have the Nazis. And those guys were crazy. They were occultic, and they were obviously satanic, and they went after the Jews, and you had people who were supporting them, and none of them were actually Christians. And I mean it, and it's like, we've got the same thing going on. It just, this stuff happens over and over down through history. And the only answer is there's a spiritual issue there. Yeah.
So here's the second part of the question. Do the Palestinian civilians in Rafah not know where the Hamas terrorist government is hiding amongst them? And then she has an interview on that gives Pastor Steve about the UN British point of view. But basically they went into Rafah because that's where the terrorist stronghold is. Mm-hmm. In the whole world. When I say the whole world, a vast majority side with the Palestinians, and they turn Israel into basically a civilian destroyer, and they're going after the innocents.
Well, when you're saying the vast majority, I don't know if it's the vast majority of the world or the vast majority of government officials.
Okay.
Yeah, and because obviously this is a minority opinion in the United States.
Yeah.
They've done polling on this. And so you have the vast majority of people in the United States who think that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and they're crazy, and the people who are supporting them are crazy.
Yeah.
And so, but that's where the politicians are. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of tells you what's going on with those guys. In any case, as far as whether or not the Gazans know where these guys are, you're going to have a mixed bag there. You're going to have some people in Gaza who hate Hamas and don't want to have anything to do with them. But one of the things that you have to know about this group of people in Gaza is that they go out and demonstrate routinely. And so when anything awful happens in the United States, so for example, 9/11, the people in Gaza and the people in the West Bank were out celebrating in the streets, burning tires and doing the things that they do, and they were celebrating over the fact that
American flags.
Yeah, burning American flags, that kind of thing. We're the great Satan. You've got Gazans right now who are shooting at American troops that are trying to bring aid to Gaza. There's a situation where they're trying to build a pier off the coast of the Gaza Strip, and they have to protect themselves from Palestinians who are shooting at them while they're building a pier to bring aid in, of all things. And so when you're looking at this group of people, these guys are people who have been trained from the time that they were children. They've been indoctrinated that the Jews and the American West, or excuse me, the Western civilizations are evil, and that they all need to be wiped out. And they're trained that they're to go after the Jews first, and then to come after America. And this is just in their literature. And so that's what you've got there. And again, I have no doubt that there are going to be people in the Gaza Strip that don't go along with that, but they are not in the majority in that place. And so I think that we have to be realistic about what's going on in the situation there. If a majority of the people in Gaza did not want Hamas shooting rockets from schools, Hamas would not be shooting rockets from schools. If a majority of the people in Gaza did not want Hamas shooting rockets from hospitals, then Hamas would not be shooting rockets from hospitals. That's pretty straightforward. And so that's kind of the situation that you have there. The other thing that's going on is Israel has evacuated like 1 million people from Rafah before they've gone in to start taking out Hamas there. That has never happened in the history of the world. It never happened that a nation goes in and literally evacuates a civilian population before a city is attacked. Yeah. We've had situations in World War II where the United States dropped pamphlets telling people to leave and that kind of thing, but we never went in and surrounded the place and said, get out of the city, before we come in. And so, it's like, again, it's just baffling how people can get their opinions on this whole thing. And when you try to share the truth about what's going on, they just, it's like they cover their eyes, they block their ears, and they go, la, 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 I'm not listening to you. And that, again, is a spiritual issue.
Yeah, you mentioned the indoctrination of the people over there where the kids are raised and trained in that. We've had a version of that here in America from secular schools where you have the youngsters being trained and indoctrinated, and now we have these protests going on and a generation of people who are doing these things because of what they were taught in school.
Right.
And what's interesting about that to me...
Or what they were not taught.
Or what they were not taught.
Yeah.
You already mentioned 10 Commandments taken out,
yeah.
Biblical worldview taken out. But what's interesting about that to me is that in the end times, in the time when Christ comes back, Israel stands alone.
Uh-huh.
And now you have all the countries surrounding them, and their allies that they used to have are fading off into the distance.
Right.
Now, maybe a majority of Americans, don't see it that way, but the elites for sure, the people who are in control, are listening to the mob and separating themselves on policies that we have never done here, at least from America to Israel ally situation.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of the end times.
Right, exactly. And so when Israel gets attacked by that coalition of nations mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38, they are alone. Looks like there's a diplomatic protest in Bible speak in that passage, and that is all there is. They're alone, and it's God who saves the nation of Israel at that point. It's one of the ways that God shows the people of Israel that he's still there and that he is still involved with them. And it's one of the ways that the Spirit of God is poured out on the nation of Israel, too, according to Ezekiel chapter 39. So it has to get to that point. And we can obviously see that it's going there. That's why, I think that we need to be voting, and we need to vote in such a way that our politicians are at least moving towards a biblical morality. I don't expect my political leaders to be pastors. I would like it if they were, but that's not what I expect. And so what I vote for is what they will do at this point. And then I hope for somebody who actually has a godly point of view. And when you're looking at the Democrat Party and who's in office right now, they do not have a godly point of view, and they are doing evil things. And I'm not worried about what people think about what I just said. That's exactly what they're doing. They're doing wicked things, and that's where the world is going to go. And so I don't know what's happening this election, because the Bible predicts that Israel's going to be alone. And I know that if the Democrats are in office, that's where it's going to go, that Israel's going to be alone.
I was listening to a pastor unpack Romans 1 the other day, and one of the comments that he made was, God's judging the nation by their leaders being implemented that are evil, evil leaders. Mm-hmm. And it's tied to the morality of the people, and God gives them the rulers that they desire.
Right. Yep.
And man, can you...
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now.
Yep.
To a T.
Yep.